All right, that's better. All right. Um,
Can you see
Tom,
me?
you hear me at all?
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Okay. Entertainingly, I can't hear you. Let me see if I can fix that problem. It's always an
Hmm.
adventure with technology. Oh,
Let's see if
that's because
my
I'm listening to. There we go. Hello, Tom. How are you?
hello. Good,
Hi. There we
Corey.
go.
We're both here.
Yes. You know, it was hilarious. I probably could have heard you the entire time, but I was literally listening through the wrong headphone jack.
And I was
The
getting weird feedback because it was, even though I had attached the microphone, it was using the microphone, the
techno
laptop microphone. So here we go.
technology is always fun. But anyway, we're live, folks. If you're following along live, thanks for joining us. It's Friday, February 26th, soon to be March here in the fair state of Wisconsin, and it's the snow is starting to melt outside, and it's looking fairly glorious. Um, as always, I'm Corey Singletary, and I have joining me Tom Content, our executive director, and yeah, it's good to be here. And we were talking earlier this week, and you're like, I think there's some stuff that we should talk about this week. So I think the first one, you and I both had to get some haircuts and go and put on suits for a hearing on Wednesday.
That's right.
Start with that.
We had to we had to be all ready to talk to the legislature. So we had a the legislature had a joint hearing of the two utilities committees, and it was on the PSC omnibus bill, which includes a consumer advocate funding modernization proposal as part of that. So this is a bill that was negotiated, a compromise bill, a consensus bill that was negotiated with CUB and with the utilities, with PSC commissioners who were appointed by different governors, and then the chairs of the two committees in the legislature. So it's a funding proposal that can help CUB do more for the small customers, small business and residential customers in the future. And we're glad that it got to about the what maybe the 5 yard line last year. Same bill, and
Hmm.
made it all the way. It was bipartisan support, supported unanimously in the utilities committees and the assembly, and then the Senate with COVID was going to vote in March and never reconvened in light of COVID. So the session ended. The session typically ends right around this in the springtime, but uh, in the even numbered year. But anyway, it's back, and it's the same proposal in front of the legislature, and we're excited that it's appears to be moving forward.
I was wondering if we wanted to talk at all about sort of the substance of that. You'd mentioned that it's sort of it's part of our funding is part of a broader bill, but maybe starting with our piece. I know for our part, that was it feels like a multi-year process, right? Um, going back to just sort of spitballing of what can we do to um, make this situation more tenable for us in the office, but also in terms of advocacy for our constituents, for residential and small business customers. Um, so maybe winding back a little bit. Most folks probably don't have a good feel for how CUB is funded to
Exactly.
start with, and I think that might be eye opening for some people in terms of where we've been, where we're currently at, and maybe even how that compares to some other states.
Yeah, no, it really goes back to the uniqueness of the CUB model. Wisconsin was the first state to create a CUB back in 1979, and so the first CUB in the country. And then other CUBs have formed in other states, but what's really unique about Wisconsin, Wisconsin and Oregon. So there are two. We're not the only one, but there are only two states that have just a CUB. doing this work, the consumer advocate work for all the small customers. Most states, 44 states, in fact, have an attorney general's office or a state office. Some people call it the Office of People's Counsel in different places, but it's a state government agency that does this. And here in the Midwest, we see other states that are spending where the advocacy between the CUBs and those agencies is there's the ratepayers and or taxpayers in some cases, but the ratepayers mainly are paying up to $1.5 million to $4 million a year just to make sure that there's that level playing field that CUB helps create at the commission. So they're balancing the utility side, the customer side, the utilities doing their fiduciary responsibility to try to do the best for their shareholders, but the customers who have to foot the bill, and we have to help vet to make sure what's truly needed is what gets approved by the PSC in rates. And so where this came from is this is a proposal that actually inclining for CUB. CUB lost a staff attorney a few years ago because we couldn't afford to match the salary that was offered by the state government. So this would enable CUB to once again have our own staff attorney, but also enable us to have what we hope a team of joining you as analysts to help dive into the utilities and their finances and have more technical expertise on staff. And that became important after the settlements law a couple of years ago. So, and you've been involved in all these settlement discussions with the utilities. But can you talk about how that kind of the settlements law created challenges for CUB?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think you got quite in the weeds to this level, but back in the day, CUB as an organization, and I'm looking at myself here, and I'm like, no one needs to see the rest of my basement here. Back in the day, even as recently as 2016, 2015, when I was still on commission staff, the model for CUB. And to be perfectly honest, this is the case for a lot of offices all around the country too. Is the model for CUB in Wisconsin was to have a staff of 2 or 3 in the house, but for the technical expertise, we would, as an organization, contract out with expert witnesses and technical experts from around the country, from various consulting firms or what have you, and we would, go through the process. It's like contracting for anything. We would reach out to them and in a case and say, okay, here's what the case is. Here's what the utility is proposing. What do you think we need to look at? What does that scope of work look like? How much is that going to cost? How much time is it going to take you? And we go through that. We get a proposal and we go to the commission and ask for money. Through the intervenor compensation process, the commission takes however much time it feels it needs to review and vet that request, and then meets and decides on how much, if CUB is awarded any funding through the intervenor compensation fund, and how much. And then at that point, we can actually start paying that consultant. But as you mentioned with the settlements law, right. You've got sort of a truncated timetable in that between at the very earliest, maybe December in a preceding year, up through the time period we are right now, and in January, February, March, up through the spring, the utilities reach out to us and be like, "Oh, here's what we're thinking, and we're thinking maybe we can reach a settlement with you folks and other parties," and they lay out for us a proposal, and all the numbers, a lot of the same kind of data you would have in a full rate case, and they're like, so what do you think? Can we sign on the dotted? And if we had to go out and contract with an expert from someplace to look at it, there's no way we could actually line up the work and the funding. So we would never be able to get people to do that work for us. We could never promise them they would ever get paid. So we need to have expertise in-house, folks like myself, and I'm really hoping that we'd start building a small team, because my area of expertise is a narrow slice of the utility industry, but there's a lot of other areas that really, to be perfectly honest, affect the big dollars, a little bit more. And then if we had those folks in house, we could actually sit down across the table from the utilities, really at any point, irrespective of timing before the commission and getting approval for funding, and have these conversations with the utilities about these issues, and whether it's seeking a settlement or them just seeking input from us on a proposal that they might have to see what we think and see how they might be able to approve something before they even apply before the commission. I think that that's super valuable and is going to be necessary going forward, with or without settlements, because all of the utilities have at least publicly made a pledge that they would like to do more stakeholder engagement. They would like to talk to us earlier in the process and try to get buy-in and consensus on these proposals, so we don't necessarily have to go, knock down, drag out fights in these proceedings. So yeah, I think it's huge, and that settlements law, has worked in terms of encouraging by statute, by law, requiring that parties try to reach settlement where possible.
Right.
And we've managed to get by. But maybe talk. I think there were some things that were greasing the skids a little bit and making it easier to lift the last couple of years, in terms of a gift, as it were, from the federal level in terms of tax code. You think maybe there were some contributing factors to us being able to make that work the last few years?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we were able to negotiate a lot of rate freezes with utilities, where utilities normally come in to, they have to, when they file, they're filing for increases, and that gift came in the form of corporate tax reform that Congress passed a few years ago, where the corporate tax rate used to be much higher and came down to a significantly lower level for all corporations. But for utilities, what that meant was, this thing was passed in December, and immediately they were collecting too much money from customers the next year, and so they money to return to customers, and that didn't come back necessarily in all funds. Some money came back right away in 2018, I think it was, but then additional money was used to kind of help get to a handshake and get to settle cases to keep rates and energy bills from rising in the last few years. The challenge we have going forward is that settlements don't get any easier when there's no more money to allocate from those tax cuts. So that's the challenge. Is now the settlements become more difficult. It's not going to be easy, but that's where having this added staff of technical experts who will be knowledgeable about Wisconsin utilities and be able to interact with them year round, and interact with the PSC as well. That there'll be this kind of ongoing dialogue can help forge a results in different areas for customers, that such as on low income issues and other things.
Yeah, and I think one thing you touched on that we've even heard from our utility counterparts when we've had conversations with them is, because of your history going back even through your journalism days and the sort of knowledge base you bring there, which I'm not going to lie, because of the way your brain works, that means that in many instances you remember way more things than I do in terms of details. And then my experience back through with the commission going back to 2010, and at the same time, right, we've got this sort of institutional memory, even just the two of us, and Rich has been doing this in the office for years, so he has a good sense of the flow of how these issues come and go. But over at the commission, while there are a lot of great staff over there that do good work, there are days when we're in a proceeding or something, and I'm thinking, okay, who should I call? And then the next thought I have is who's still working there?
Right.
Who's still there manning the shop, that still has that institutional memory? Because when I started there, you know, this was in 2010, prior to some policy changes in the state that caused a lot of folks to retire early. And the average age, I think it was something like 65% or 70% of the staff was eligible for retirement when I walked in the door, but they were still there. They were still doing the work, and they knew. One of our board members, former PSC staff member, and my former boss, Carol Stemmerich, you could go to her and ask her about something, and she would absolutely remember. Oh yeah, back in whatever year, this is the docket. These were the issues,
Right.
and the utilities have told us that it's helpful, it's absolutely refreshing, and they love the fact that they can have these conversations with us, and we, that institutional memory and that ability to go from year to year to year and build these relationships is critical to having these conversations. And if we're going to have more of these settlement conversations, or if every proceeding is always going to involve the question of, is there a settlement that's being proposed here, I think that there's that added value of, even if we're not talking settlement, just the fact that we will hopefully build within our in-house staff, we will build our own sort of hopefully longer standing institutional capacity that will allow us to build those relationships that allow for more effective work, which I think is key in this area. It will certainly help us in the regulatory area. Are there other benefits you see that you're hoping will come out of being able to have some additional funding flexibility and a little more money in the tank, as it were?
Well, I think one of the benefits is just in terms of my schedule and how much if we have a regulatory team under the new plan, we'd have a regulatory team led by you, that where we would have that team focusing on kind of the wonkiest of the wonky stuff, if you will, what that CUB does. What this does, it can help free me up to do more of the consumer education and message sharing information with the public, with post-COVID, going back to community events, community meetings with chambers of commerce and the like, and local groups that we're hoping to keep doing virtually this year. If you're interested, let us know. But even after COVID, would be able to do more of that, because CUB has two core missions, and one is the bread and butter wonky stuff of saving money in the cases at the PSC and advocating for fairness. But the other is we have this other mission of education, and you've been helping that through the YouTube tutorial videos, and we're going to be doing more consumer information. We have consumer resources on our website. We have our blog, but it frees up both Rich, who's handled to deal with not only deal with members and member issues, but also more having a more communications presence around the state, and trying to get the word out about what's going on with your utility and how you can get involved.
Unmute the mic, boy. That flexibility, I think, is important because, it's most people don't know we exist, right? CUB's been around for 40 years. I think we've mentioned that in previous videos and in a lot of our media. CUB's been around for 40 years. We've been doing this work as an organization for feels like forever, and most people don't know we're here. And I think that, especially, I was just watching this morning when I got up, I opened my opened YouTube, and one of the videos in my subscription feed was a video from Trevor Noah and The Daily Show. And wouldn't you know it, it's about, America's utilities, and it's talking about how, how bad it is, and, how, and everything, and raising all these, I will admit, completely valid issues in the utility industry. But right now, at this exact moment, there are so many people looking at the utility industry as an issue, as a public policy issue.
Exactly.
And people probably don't know that we're here, and we've been, kind of minding the shop on this. for a while, and to a certain extent, part of the reason, or I would like to think a contributing factor for why, um, when we have had these big winter storms, when we have had these heat waves, while certainly a few people lose power from time to time, that we don't have these catastrophes, in the state. That folks like who've worn our hats as consumer advocates in the past, as well as commission staffers and commissioners in the past, have made it so that we do have fairly high reliability in the state. But there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of really important issues, and I think that consumer outreach and customer education piece is key to moving forward, for folks to be more educated about this industry that affects them so deeply. Did you want to go at all into sort of, maybe not down the totally down the rabbit hole in terms of the gory details of how it works, but did you want to talk a little bit about kind of, what the new model would look like, and how that's a change from, where we are right now?
Sure. So, and fill in the blanks for me, because whatever I missed. But so currently we certainly still have members. We have members across the state who contribute to us every year. We appreciate them and their support, but that's not enough to sustain a CUB. So what CUB has done in the past there's a $300,000 grant that was created way back, probably 14, I don't know, 2005, 6, 7, I can't remember the year, but it was that was created as a kind of a path forward, as an annual grant through the Intervenor Compensation Fund of the PSC to help CUBs work. But the transition to a new model is, because of those settlement cases and the timelines of trying to get and being able to get the funding for those national experts, and the ability to have those experts in-house with the new model, instead of a $300,000 grant plus about $150,000 to $200,000 in intervenor comp that CUB was getting every year. So this new model takes CUB from about 500,000 total to about 900, up to 900,000 total. The PSC would still have authority to, decide, is the CUB budget, should it be, it's up to $900,000. So they have the final say on what the actual number is year to year, but the vision is for it's a bigger piece of funding, but it's coming. Right now, what utility customers on average on your electric bill, you're paying about a penny a month for CUB's work, and this adds basically another penny a month to that bill. So I think Corey did the number crunching, but we came up with about 19 cents a year was the amount that a typical customer would pay. So, and give most people pay 85 to 100 bucks a month for an electric bill. There's the gas bill too, but that's your total bill is even bigger. But that's what this funding model entails in terms of the overall. If you want to dive into any of the other specifics that you want to share, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's I think in the hearing that we had on Wednesday, I think one of the most accurate characterizations was enabling a mechanism by which utility customers can directly fund CUB. And because, I think you mentioned it before, like, we will still be one of the lowest funded consumer advocate. I think it's still the lowest funded consumer advocate office in the Midwest. Yes. But we won't have a ton of resources, but the utilities on an average year spend somewhere on the neighborhood of probably at least $4 million sum total across all the major utilities for their, regulatory work before the PSC. And my suspicion is it's a little more than that because of how hours get allocated to staff internally and so forth. But, get the way, for folks that are curious as to how it would work, I think, Tom had mentioned there's a budget that the PSC would review. And the way that the statute is set up is, they have the ability to ask basically any questions they have for us in terms of how we're spending the money. So the intent is still that to ensure that we're good stewards of ratepayer dollars. The few cents per customer that we get from everybody, but that's important. But then after the PSC reviews our budget and then approves it, the utilities basically write us a check for that amount, and there's a mechanism laid out in the statute for how that's divvied out. But the utilities will basically cut us a check for the amount that we need to run the shop. And folks who might look at the statute and say, okay, well then utilities are funding CUB, isn't that a conflict? And my response would be no, because it's not like the utility shareholders paying us or anything like that. It's meant to be a pass through from the customers to us. And if the bill is passed, then it would be a part of state law, and it wouldn't be something the utilities could really, withhold and have as some sort of leverage over us. And I think the key part of that is also something that I think PSC Chair Valk mentioned, is that and the utility committee chairs in the legislature, is that it maintains the independence for us, because while the model that we have with us not being a state agency, not being part of the AG's office or the commission or anything like that, it presents these funding challenges that we're trying to work through right now. But the benefit it confers to us is that we are truly an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. And so the only people that we essentially answer to are the customers. Which is why we're always grateful when people reach out to us and ask us questions or give us their opinions, because that's the only way that we can help inform, what the positions we take beyond just what the math tells us. So that will happen on an annual basis. So there's some new different hoops that we'll have to jump through, but we're hoping that will be relatively painless. And we can focus, I think, to your point about hours spent on things that, you'll be able to shift some more of your focus into reaching out to folks and fulfilling more of that customer education mission that CUB does have in its bylaws and intended in its creation way back when it was created in statute. And then we can have a good team in-house that can focus on, the regulatory issues, 24/7, 365, and be able to pick up the phone and have meaningful conversations with the utilities at any point, even if that conversation is, hey, what are you doing here?
Right.
So
I don't understand this. Explain, please explain. Yeah. And I think what's interesting is you brought up the kind of that we're going to be efficient stewards of those 2 cents a month. And we've always, our books have been open for years. Every time we apply for any intervenor compensation funding application at the PSC, everything's submitted. Our financial statements are there. We have an independent audit done every year, and that's available for anybody to look at on our website. And so it's important. But what's significant here is it really empowers CUB to really dive into the other $84.98 on the utility bill, on a typical utility bill, and see what's is there anything that is there waste, or is there something that our analysts can find that can save money for customers, to help utility customers by helping you convince the PSC that utilities can be more efficient in discrete areas A, B, and C, down the road.
Yeah, so we had that committee hearing. It was a joint committee hearing, both the Assembly and the Senate, this past week on Wednesday. And my understanding is they've scheduled some dates for votes in both those committees to hopefully move that along. And then that'll truck along Schoolhouse Rock style up hopefully to the governor's desk. I literally have no wood near me, so I cannot knock on wood to ward off the gremlins. But
consider consider it done. There's a lot of wood in my basement, so as you can see,
I've got nothing but concrete and basement wiring and gas plumbing and
I've
things of
got
that
enough
nature.
wood to knock on for all of CUB and all of our CUB members, maybe too.
Yeah. So our hope is that hopefully maybe by as early as the end of March, we'll wind this particular chapter to a close, and we'll get on to bigger and better things for the customer.
The next phase of CUB.
Yes, the next evolution, as the military might call it. So that's not the only thing happening downtown, as it were. You're a little more familiar with this. You had pointed out, you had mentioned to me the Governor Evers emergency renter assistance bill.
Yeah.
And let me see.
Yeah, that's
here.
good stuff. Yeah, he put that out yesterday morning. There was a press release from the governor's office and the Department of Administration, and so this links back to the COVID pandemic, and the kind of the relief bill that Congress passed in December. There have been a couple COVID bills, and there's another one that's being talked about again today. But this one in December actually allocated $25 billion nationally. And it's called an emergency rental assistance program. But the reason we're talking about it here is because, unlike the prior bills, this one includes, you can, for customers who are struggling, it includes utility bill arrears, so unpaid utility bills. And with all the disconnections for public health and safety reasons that there have been for utility customers, there are some concerns about the balances of unpaid bills that utilities have right now. So there's actually, it's two sets of, there's actually a statewide program, which is the one that was announced yesterday at $322 million. But there's an additional I can do the math in my head here, $65 million that counties around the state will have available for local folks. So that includes about if I have the numbers correct, I think it's about $9 million in Dane County, and then there's a bunch. There's Milwaukee County, Waukesha County, Brown County. Milwaukee City has funding as well. So some of the details in terms of which local agencies or community action agencies or local folks, which local organization, that's not all in there, but the DOA Emergency Rental Assistance Program has information, and we updated our COVID-19 page, and we're going to post a blog today with more information on this. But it's good to see. It's good to see, and we're trying to help get the word out about this in any way, because there's a lot of folks who are struggling, and sometimes they don't know about these resources that are available.
Yeah, I threw I've got the page for the Wisconsin Emergency Rental Assistance Program up on the screen, and you can see there the local community action agency organizations that are participating, and the ways you can get in touch with the program to apply, and who's eligible, and that kind of thing. So and I dropped that in the chat, and I'll put that in the description afterwards, so folks can find that. But I think that's great in terms of additional funding for folks in this time of continued need, and excuse me, in addition to hopefully helping folks continue to have a place to live,
right,
which continues to be critical as the weather is still very cold outside. Making certain that folks can pay their utility bills, and maybe if they need to dig themselves out of a hole in terms of back paid bills if they have those. So happy to do anything that we can do to sort of signal boost the availability of that program through our channels. And I know in this house where there's a lot of public advocacy going on in this house. My wife does some work for the Tenant Resource Center, which is one of the agencies that's doing some work in there in the city of Madison.
That's right. That's right.
So
You
it's
got a house of advocacy. That's great. And one thing that I wanted to bring up just related to this is Congress, as I mentioned, is talking about, the $1.9 trillion the current price tag that's being talked about in Washington for the next COVID bill. And so CUB, through our two organizations that we belong to, has been asking for more funding on this score. Customers First Coalition here in Wisconsin, which is a group that formed years ago to beat back deregulation of the utility industry and keep residential customers from facing monthly bills of $5,000 or $17,000 that we're seeing right now in Texas. Customers First sent a letter this week to the Wisconsin congressional delegation for the next COVID bill, looking for more money for low income and utility arrears. And then the National Consumer Advocate Network that we're involved with, which includes the CUBs as well as the AG's offices around the country, that's called NASUCA. They sent a letter in January to congressional leadership also seeking more funding for this. And one thing that is in the House version, we're going to have to see what passes in Congress, but I think it's worth mentioning that there'll be more money for this rental program that includes utility bill assistance, but then there will also be money for homeowners who are struggling and facing foreclosure, and that's kind of a missing piece in what was passed in December. That the new bill may plug that gap a little with. I don't know the exact number that's in there nationwide, but it's in the billions. So we should have, if that moves forward, there should be millions available in Wisconsin for homeowners who are struggling. So we'll keep folks up to date about that as that emerges. But I wanted to just mention that at least though we're trying to get the word out that there's money available, and hopefully there'll be more money coming.
Yeah, public funding for these things, essentially, through taxes and through other things. Everybody chipping in to help out folks in a time of need, exactly. I guess hopefully unprecedented and hopefully going forward rare sort of time in need. But yeah, that's really great to hear that there's some relief coming for folks, and some of it's already arriving, and folks can apply for that. And like I said, make certain to check the description down below for the link to the Wisconsin Assistance Program, and keep an eye out on the news or any of our social media about any changes or any additions to programs that might be available there. So yeah, that's great.
And the last thing I just mentioned, which is unrelated to what CUB does. So in Wisconsin, the legislature deregulated telecommunications companies years ago, maybe about 10 years ago now, roughly. But just this morning, the Federal Communications Commission announced a kind of a lifeline service subsidy for low income for broadband. So it's going to be stipends of, say, $50 a month, I believe, and maybe $75 if you're on a Native American reservation. So that's something. The Lifeline programs started in the telecom industry as to help with your local phone service before we all migrated to phones we can carry around. But in this pandemic where internet and online school and the whole bit become critical, this is really interesting to see. This is another thing that was just launched by Congress and now being implemented today, coincidentally, by the FCC. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I did see that and then pop up in the news this morning, and I was like, that looks great. I think I only saw the $50 number, but the the 75 on tribal lands is right. Definitely a good plus, because those areas are, they have some serious challenges in terms of but for just to start in terms of availability of options, and let alone cost, and I think most folks are aware of the socioeconomic challenges, folks that live on the tribal lands and indigenous folks generally in the United States. Exactly. So yeah, that broadband assistance, because broadband is, say what you might, it's an essential service at this point. Even just to apply for a job, even just to do a job search, you need a fast, reliable internet connection just to look around, just to make certain you have some place where you can apply for work and bring some money home. So, I know I've had some fun conversations this morning already with some other folks, and some organizations about some of these issues already, that we've been talking about: affordability, household burden, and that kind of stuff. And it reminds me that this is it's continuous work. The work is never done. And we're looking forward to getting some data. I think we talked about, maybe, or tried to talk about in the last stream. The audio was glitchy, and I apologize for that. Hopefully it sounds better. Let us know down in the comments how this sounds. We're trying a new setup for the live stream that is both easier to administer from my end, but also hopefully a better experience for all y'all. But as we mentioned in some previous conversations, we're looking forward to getting some data from our utilities on household utility burden, household energy burden, and really starting to take a deep dive into some of these, sort of the intersection between our work and some of these social justice issues that a lot of other organizations are looking at. So, yeah, the work never stops for any of this, really.
That's right. So, yeah. So if on the first topic, if people want to find out more, Wisconsin Eye has the whole hearing on tape. If you want to hear all the folks who testified, from the PSC chair to the utilities to the Chairman Kuglich and Chairman Bradley of the two utilities committees, to Corey and me, and then it was nice to see small business come in support to National Federation of Independent Business. Bill Smith was there. Bill mentioned how back in the day, NFIB was involved in some things at the proceedings at the PSC, and ended up joining that Customers First Coalition that I mentioned when it was founded. But over time, Bill realized, hey, this is wonky stuff, and let's leave this to CUB, and as the advocate for small business and residential folks, and so we appreciate the support of business groups, including NFIB and WMC and others that are helping helping enable the bipartisan and widespread support for this new plan for CUB.
Yeah, much like we always say, we're happy to hear from and encourage folks to reach out to us individually, which is typically sort of the homeowner, residential ratepayer, residential customer. I hate that ratepayer term. Residential customer perspective. Same thing with the small business community. I think there's a great opportunity for us to, work in tandem with organizations like that, where we can leverage our strengths and we can do the work that we do, but also bring in the perspective that they have, probably more from the sort of front line, maybe worker training or legislative lobbying, or sort of the on the ground issues that they deal with as a trade organization or business organization, to inform the work that we do in our little wonky circle. So absolutely, we're always looking for partners across our entire constituency, whoever they are.
Exactly. And we've, when we started the utility bill clinics a couple of years ago, and that was to help people save on their energy bills, but it's also an opportunity for small businesses as an employee engagement opportunity, to offer kind of lunch and learn kind of opportunities for their employees. So, and that's, again, another thing that we hope we can do. We know we'll be able to do more of as my time and Rich's time are freed up as this moves forward. So excited to keep interacting with folks, and whatever means. We're still in this pandemic, so a lot of everything's virtual for now, but we'll get out of this at some point. Let's keep these only once every 100 years, or even less frequent if we can.
Yeah, I hope so. I told Andrea I'm concerned that we have a 2.5-year-old. In addition to teaching him letters and numbers and colors and how to ask politely for things, I'm concerned that I'm going to have to teach him how, not just as a nice thing to know, but I might have to teach him how to like garden and hunt and build, shelters for survival in preparation for some sort of like post-apocalyptic future. And I'm hoping we don't go in that direction, because that's just too much. And we don't want that for anybody. So
no thanks.
But you got a fun weekend planned, such as one can have during a pandemic?
I think we were trying to hit one of the ice rinks before it closes, because now it's warm. We've been hitting the free rinks that enabled by Mother Nature when we hit the 20 below. But we might try to hit that this week. Hit one of there's the downtown Milwaukee one's supposed to be wrapping up, I think, this weekend, so we might try to hit that. But other than that, it's back to the grindstone on some of all those cases we talked about the last time at the time before. But
yeah, in fact, I have a call this afternoon with someone to get circle back to sort of one of those questions I mentioned earlier. It's like, what is up with this? Please explain to me what is going on here, so that I, at a minimum, am not yelling at you. So,
yep.
But all right, so cool, excellent. So thanks everyone for joining us, and be safe, take care, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye.
See you, everybody.